First of all, what's your objective for this evening?
Flog a load of books and promote the wonderful, award-winning Booker Bookshop.
Why did you decide this was a subject you wanted to cover? You've been increasingly moving towards fiction in recent books, so why did you decide to move back into this area?
Well, I've done 3 novels, but I've always done a non-fiction book in between, and I think I'll probably will do another novel. I don't know why I wrote this book, other than the idea appealed. I can't remember when I first thought about it, but I do think one of the reasons for writing it is because I think there's so much kind of negativity around, and particularly in Britain at the moment, it's kind of a global phenomenon, but Britain has a very negative culture at the moment, and I wanted to write a very positive book about very positive people who've done great things, but in a way that mere mortals, as it were, can relate to. And I think the general mainstream media culture, obviously not the Shropshire Star, which is probably my favourite newspaper in Shropshire. The mainstream media is kind of relentlessly negative, and I think people are getting sick of it. I write in the book about resilience and Beckham and how people now, Beckham, he's sort of an icon and a global figure and all the rest of it. But there was a time when he couldn't walk down the street without being abused, because he was, responsible for England getting knocked out of the World Cup. Phil Neville's another one who, will talk about how horrible it was to have this sense of the whole country, but actually it's not the whole country, it's the papers, but the whole country feeling like they're trying to destroy you.
Yeah.
So winning isn't always about being the number one. I think it's a mindset. The question is, can you develop that mindset? I think you can, if you want to.
What were the different presidents you worked with like as personalities, away from the cameras, away from publicity?
I think actually both. I mean, the ones that I knew best were Clinton and Bush, and I'd say they're both what you see is what you get. Although with Bush,
people were quite unkind about Bush.
They're very unkind about Bush, but the thing I would say about him, I say in the book, he's much more human. He's much more self-deprecating. You might say he's got a lot to self-deprecate about, but he actually. And I'll tell you the thing I really liked about Bush is that I always think you can tell a lot about leaders by how they treat the people around them. And Chirac and Putin, for example, very kind of above them and very dismissive of their people. Tony always very good at surrounding himself with people who would challenge him. But what was interesting about Bush is like, if you were walking around the White House and he was just sort of, going out to a press conference or going out to the car, whatever it might be, he'd know the names of all the people that he passed. The guy the security guys, the secretaries, the drivers, he'd know that their kid, one of their sons had a driving test or whatever it might be. And he was just, something about Bush, the opposite of most modern politicians is that, see, someone like Cameron actually kind of comes alive when there's a TV camera there. Bush was the opposite. Bush was better when the cameras weren't there. And when the cameras came on, he always kind of went into this kind of, very defensive mode. And added to which, he did have an unusual relationship with the English language. He did say.
That wasn't just on camera then?
No, he did say some pretty extraordinary things. Misunderestimate, that was what but he was. Clinton to me was like the master in terms of, what I do, which is the whole strategic communications thing. And that thing, talking to Clinton about the moniker, I mean, he's my main focus in the chapter on crisis management. And he said, and Tom is right, he said, I was the president, I was the most powerful man in the world, and I was sleeping on the sofa. And he was.
I would have thought there was more than one bedroom in the way.
Yeah, but that's not the point. Are you married? On the sofa, it's kind of not about where you're sleeping, it's the fact that you're not in the bed. And it's sort of it's breaking the rules to think you can go to another bed. Part of the punishment is you sleep in something that is not a bed. Okay? Just warning you about this. So he was, but what was interesting, you talk about objective strategy tactics, or I talk about that, but interestingly, when I said to him, how did you get through that period when it was pretty horrific? And it's, the thing about politicians is they're just human beings in the end. And I can remember when he was over in Northern Ireland, he was brilliant in Northern Ireland, and Hillary was with him, and it was right at the height of the whole thing was raging. And I said not in this book, but in another book I wrote, I said, Hillary, when they were in private, he was in a deep freeze. There was no connection at all. When the cameras were there, she would paint on it wasn't a smile, but she'd sort of do what she had to do because she was the First Lady and she was conscious of that. So that's reality. So he's trying to make all these big decisions whilst he's sort of trying to hold his marriage together. He's got the Republicans literally trying to kill him. He's got Kenneth Starr, part of that, the independent prosecuting counsel. And he's somehow got to keep going. So I said, how did you keep going? And he said, I had a very simple objective, survival. My strategy was to do the job, and my tactics were to make sure the American people knew that's what I was doing. And I think that that's an example of where if you have this idea of what's my objective, what's the strategy, here's the tactics, you can apply it to everything, good and bad, at the moment. That here we are, going into an election, May the 7th, and so much of the talk is what's going to happen when nobody wins. It's kind of like weird, and when actually we're at that phase, to my mind, when we shouldn't even be contemplating not winning. Everything should be focused on winning. I think this is going to be one of those elections, a bit like the Scottish referendum campaign, where people, I think it will get really exciting towards the end. At the moment it feels very kind of dull, and people aren't really engaging that much, and they're sort of thinking, oh God, can't we just get on with it kind of thing.
Are we expecting some fabulously rash promises in about 3 days to go then?
No, I don't think it'll be that. I think it'll be a bit like, I hope it'll be a bit like the Scottish referendum campaign, which went on and on and on, and people said, oh, please stop, no more. And then the last couple of weeks, it just went, it was amazing up there. It was like the most exciting campaign I've ever been involved in. It really, you were literally walking down the street, and kids in school uniform were arguing about Trident and welfare reform and whether they liked Alex Salmon. And it was amazing, whereas normally they'd be talking about, bloody Kim Kardashian or Simon Cowell or some other crap. And so, here we are. If you're Prime Minister, and particularly if you're Prime Minister like David Cameron, I mean, it's on the news literally every night, okay? And you expect a Prime Minister to be high profile, but he's literally on the news every single night. And he's always talking about something different to the night before. And I point out in the book, for example, that, he's very good at pictures, okay? So he goes to the Arctic Circle, don't even remember it, fantastic picture. He's wearing a beautiful blue tracksuit, he's being pulled along by these huskies on a sled. It's on all the front pages. And he did a clip to the television, said, if I become Prime Minister, I will lead the greenest government ever. He hasn't made a single speech on climate change, right, which is quite a big issue, okay? Big society. That was the one moment at which I actually was a bit worried about Cameron. I thought this guy could be the real deal. Big society sounded to me like quite a good idea for a compassionate Conservative leader to want to do. What is it? The answer is Osborne does have a strategy. Austerity is a strategy. Cameron is just sort of, he bounces around. The reason I call him strategic butterfly is because he's just changing the whole time. And then I think it's dangerous as well. Things like, I'll give you an example. I mentioned Scotland. I mean, the day after the referendum, to come out and say, this is now about English votes for English laws. I couldn't believe he did that. That was a tactical response to a near strategic calamity. And what it's done is he's brought back into you've never had a situation in Scotland where the losers are behaving like the winners and the winners are behaving like the losers. A debate that should have been settled. And I think that was a huge tactical error.